Hello everyone. I have an emergency unboxing. Yes, it is very, very urgent. It arrived today and I have to do it straight away. I need an assistant. Who's going to help me? Poochy has volunteered. Now, someone on Twitter told me that Poochy, the amiibo, is now considered semi-rare or difficult to find. I don't know anything about that, or whether it's just a regional thing, maybe in North America. Poochy, are you rare? He doesn't care. He just sits on the sofa all day and waits for something to happen, and now he's very happy to assist me. So, what can possibly be so urgent? It is an older game, a slightly older game, part of which I have already played in the past. Well, what can possibly be so important about that? So I will get the cellophane off straight away, and I will talk a bit about these two games because it's a dual pack and there's quite a bit of history behind it, so we need to unravel that, and I will need my notes because it's fascinating. So let me first get this off. This is for all my cellophane fans. Here we go. And now you can admire the cover art without the reflection. And the spine. Now this is the limited edition which I got from Europe, NIS Europe. I tried to look it up today to see whether the limited edition is still available, and as far as I can tell from the NIS America website, it's gone from there. I couldn't find it, but in Europe they still have supplies. So this looks and feels very much the standard NIS type of box, which I like. It's not the new premium size, you know. It's nice and sturdy, fits easily on a shelf. Good cardboard, not too thin. Now, why two games? They are obviously connected. So let's start diving into that bit of back history. By the way, if I slightly disappear behind my microphone, you can see it's a bit of an awkward setup at the moment, but this microphone gives very good audio, and I have had feedback during my premiere when we had the live chat. People said they really liked the audio, so I'm sticking with that, even though it's a bit bulky and looks a bit odd. I'm hoping to be able to get a smaller desktop kind of microphone. That would be easier. So it all started, for me anyway, with a Japanese game. And as you can see, it's still in its cellophane. Now, this game is called, in English it's referred to as Blue-Winged Chevalier. I bought it back when it released in 2019, never believing that it would ever get a Western localization. I was sort of half hoping maybe someone would do a fan translation, but I realized I'd probably have to just knuckle down one day and try and work my way through it in Japanese. This game is based on an even older game called Students of the Round, and that never came to the West either. So Blue-Winged Chevalier is, in a way, a sort of remake of the older Students of the Round game. So Students of the Round was originally a dungeon crawling RPG first released for PC in 2010 in Japan only. It was ported to the Xbox 360 with a few additional elements in 2011, and then in 2012 the PSP edition followed, again only in Japan. And I'll try and insert an image of the cover art for the PSP game. There were several variants and different covers for the different editions, so this is just one of them. So what Blue-Winged Chevalier did was it updated some of the character visuals. There were new event CGs, new monster visuals, and a revised story and in-dungeon events. So quite a considerable overhaul for the Vita edition. Now, at the time, the developer, Experience Inc., stated that this would be their last game for the Vita. Experience Inc., you may remember if you've played a few dungeon crawlers on the Vita, they were instrumental in popularizing dungeon crawlers on the Vita. Their very first one, Demon Gaze, was a big surprise hit on the Vita and sold very well, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with it. So Blue-Winged Chevalier was the last Vita game they did, but Japan only. It never came west. But the important thing they did at the time that Blue-Winged Chevalier was published was they included a copy of another one of their dungeon crawlers with it, and that was Stranger of Sword City. So this released in Japan in July 2019, and apart from Blue-Winged Chevalier, it included the revised version of Stranger of Sword City. It's called Stranger of Sword City Revisited. And that one you may be familiar with if you are in the North American region, because that is the only region that received a digital edition of the revisited version on the PSN for the Vita. I have that game digitally on my US account, but no physical release ever. This was the original release of Stranger of Sword City for the West. This edition came out in 2016 in the West, and it's one of my favourite limited editions. It's also one of my favourite dungeon crawlers because it's simply beautiful. It's quite a tough dungeon crawler. The difficulty is reasonably high. You know, if you love dungeon crawlers, you really want to get stuck into this one. I don't think I've ever shown you this before, so I'll just show it to you very briefly, because it'll also be a good point of comparison to this new edition. So it obviously came with the Vita game. It comes with an absolutely beautiful, beautiful soundtrack. 2 discs. I'm not sure about the total number of tracks or playing time, but it is a gorgeous soundtrack. It comes with a one-sided poster. Poodlepie really needs to get that laminated. I've completely forgotten about it. And this is the pièce de résistance. This is one of the most beautiful art books, honestly. Please excuse me if it's a bit awkward showing the the pages from the book because the microphone is rather in the way. How about that rabbit there? Don't you just love it? Le roi lapin, the king rabbit. And it says here, there's always little notes and text with the images explaining the background and how they had the idea for particular monsters and characters. It's wonderful. And the comment from the director is, a monster that was a user's idea. The monster Tsukamoto-san likes the most. So why a rabbit? Think back on the history of DRPGs, dungeon crawling RPGs. This is how we show our mastery of the genre, by going back to the roots. These are some of the characters you have in your team when you play the game. There's a whole range of characters and classes and races to choose from. I spent so much time on the beginning of the game re-rolling to try and get the stats onto certain characters, starter stats. I became completely obsessed with it. The artwork in this game is extraordinary. It is beautiful artwork. It's a beautiful book. I'm so glad I have it, especially now because I'll be replaying the game. And this is where we now get to the new edition. I think the game, the standard edition, came out already a while ago, possibly back in March, but they had problems putting the limited edition together because of supply line problems getting through to Europe with all the stuff they needed. I know what is in the box, but knowing is one thing, seeing it is quite another. That's why we do unboxings. Obviously there's no Vita edition anymore. The game migrated to the Switch platform. The Switch is getting everything these days, and a lot of the good stuff, you'd have to say. Discover a tale of war, darkness, and the power of bonds, coming to the West for the first time. And that is true, because we've had Stranger of Sword City before, but we haven't had Saviors of Sapphire Wings or Blue-Winged Chevalier. The world is plunged into ruin after Olmar, I'm not quite sure how that is pronounced, the Overlord of Darkness defeats the Knights of the Round. You remember I mentioned the earlier game from 2010, Knights of the Round, the last bastion of defense for mankind. 100 years later, a fallen hero returns to life and must lead a new generation of heroes to defeat Olomar's forces and restore light and hope to the world. Pretty standard RPG stuff. Explore dungeons, use traps and combat prowess to defeat powerful monsters, and bond with your allies to unlock their true potential in this RPG gem. I did read a few reviews about Saviors of Sapphire Wings. They all seem to agree that of the two, this one and Stranger of Sword City, Saviors is the easier entry point, especially for people who maybe haven't played that many dungeon crawlers before. Starting with Saviors makes sense because it is a bit easier, and then progress to Stranger of Sword City, which is set later chronologically anyway, so it all makes sense. So the marketing says that this version of Stranger of Sword City Revisited has had almost complete makeover, and it is bundled with Saviors of Sapphire Wings as a bonus game. That's nice. Well, it is a niche game, and they have to use every little marketing trick they can. I do understand that. The fact that the games were previously bundled together anyway in Japan, so they've kept that intact. It makes absolute sense. And I think it's a wonderful idea, having a dual pack. You get not one, but you get 2 games. Who can object to that? I certainly don't. So it's finally time to do the actual unboxing. So there we are. This looks like the soundtrack. Just a moment. Aha. Here we have the game. This is the reason why I'm doing an emergency unboxing. Because I finally want to play this game. I want to play it desperately. I've had the Japanese copy for so long and haven't been able to play it. And now I can play it in English. I'm so happy. I'll then, once I know the game well enough, I'll be able to play it again on the Vita and should be able to cope with it being in Japanese. But this is the one I'm really excited about. Now, how to get into the cellophane of these Switch games. I've had a lot of advice from my subscribers in our weekly chat. Thank you very much. You said I need to go into this indent here. So we're going to try that today. Yes, that worked very well. Thank you. As expected, we have only the cartridge. A hero's spirit, tempered in eternal twilight. Light and dark will clash, and saviors of sapphire wings guide a new generation of knights to defeat the overlord of darkness once and for all. I shall do my very best. Now, the OST is called Dungeons and Refrains and contains 2 discs with 22 tracks on each one. I always think it's nice to have the music from the game on in the background if possible. And here we have an enamel pin, and this is definitely a sapphire wing. I do like my enamel pins. Here is the, for me, almost the most important thing, and that is the art book. Journey from Saviour to Stranger. It's a small format, but it is quite thick. Let me just check the page number. 153 pages. So it starts out with Saviors of Sapphire Wings, and as you'd expect, the characters come first, and there are a lot of character portraits included. Monster designs feature extensively because there are a lot of different ones. Really, really well designed monsters. The background of the printing here in the book is very dark, but it's a sort of dark blue, so I feel like they don't stand out perhaps quite as much as they could, the designs. Whereas in this older book that I showed you earlier for Stranger of Sword City, while the background is a pitch black, the design stood out a bit better. I don't think the game will ever be famous, either game presumably, for its settings and backgrounds. They are what I would call serviceable. And we always have to remember that this game is based on a much older 2010 game called Students of the Round. That's a lovely image, character portrait. Some of the images are just slightly revealing, for the females. Nothing to get hot and bothered about. And there's the odd feather placed strategically in the images. Now this is lovely, and this shows you the what I think is an airship. It's got these wings, probably the Blue-Winged Chevalier. And section 2 deals with Stranger of Sword City. And any of you who've already played the game will recognise this character Rin. And here again is Le Roi Lapin. I showed you that one earlier in the bigger book, and honestly, the detail appears better in the bigger book. So I'm really glad I've got that. It's a bit compressed here. I even have to squint to read the text. But the nice thing about this hardback art book is that the pages are not glued, they are stitched. You can just see the thread running down the centre here if you look closely. And as you can see on the final back page, developer experience, publisher NIS. So that is nice to have. It doesn't quite compare in quality to the original book that came with Stranger of Sword City. If you're lucky enough to have this limited edition, I think you will treasure this art book. What I'll do to finish off, as usual, is I'll just quickly pan around the table just to show you all the items. Thank you very much for taking the time to watch me doing an emergency unboxing of Saviours of Sapphire Wings and Stranger of Sword City Revisited. Finally, it's all come together and it's all arrived in the West here. I'm going to go and pop this cartridge straight into my Switch. As always, please keep well. I'm Food for Dogs. Bye-bye.